Jean-Baptiste Reinhardt, who was nicknamed Django, which translates to I Awake in Romani, was born on the 23rd of January 1910 in Liebershuis, Belgium. He first started playing music by playing Romani-style violin, and then started the banjo guitar, which was a hybrid instrument of the banjo and the guitar, obviously, at age 12. Django never actually had lessons, and instead taught himself and picked things up from other players in camps that he played at or bars that he went to when he was growing up. He was illiterate, and throughout his career he never learned how to read music and never really understood the concepts of keys and scales. But despite all this, he created his own brand new whole style of jazz and became the first European musician to do so. By the age of 18, Django was already a very accomplished player, but tragedy struck and he was really badly burned in a caravan fire, which he narrowly escaped from with his life. His left hand and right leg were particularly badly affected, and he would end up walking with a stick actually for the rest of his life. His fourth and fifth fingers on his left hand were completely paralysed, and doctors told him that he'd never play the guitar again. But this in the end actually proved to be a turning point for him, and he relearned the guitar with a completely new technique and realised that he could break away from any of the rules of guitar playing that he had picked up along the way when he was learning before. Now this realisation of being able to break away from the rules was really the beginning of Django creating his own style, which would later become gypsy jazz, that is obviously still played today. Now, the first tune that we're going to hear is Django's classic version of J'attendrai. It's an Italian song, but he first recorded the tune, his cover, in 1938. Later that year, the Quintet de Hot Club de France, which obviously featured Stéphane Grappelli on violin, recorded the tune on video. Now, interestingly, this specific video is the only video we have of Django playing where it still has the original audio synced to the video. So, without this video, many people could still believe that the story of him only playing with two fingers might be untrue. As you can clearly see from this video, Django gets the full use out of his two fingers whilst he plays. When he's comping for Stéphane Grappelli, he sometimes rolls his wrist and uses his thumb as well to help him play the chords. And when he's soloing, you can see him moving his left hand up and down the fretboard a lot more than most guitarists would have to, obviously, because with two fingers out of action, he just doesn't have the same facility that most would. He is playing on a Selmer Petite Bouche guitar, which translates to small hole. Now this was a very resonant guitar, and paired with the ultra thin strings that he used to play in, this allowed him to play really loudly and with a lot of projection. Now something else that Django did and pioneered was using a very thick guitar pick, often made of tortoise shell, and he would pluck incredibly hard with this pick to create the power needed for the acoustic guitar to be played as a lead instrument. In his solo, Django quotes the melody a lot and plays very inside the harmony with lots of arpeggios that outline the chord tones. His fast chromatic runs are on full show in the solo as well, and you can see him sliding his fingers quickly up and down the fretboard and tremolo picking at the same time. He also used a lot of the major pentatonic scale, which was a feature of many jazz musicians playing at that time. The tune follows a non-standard 26-bar ABC form, where the A and B sections are 8 bars, followed by a 10-bar C section. Now this played into Django's more freestyle improvisation, where he would start phrases at any point in the bar and play across the bar line. The next tune we're going to listen to is Django's version of Honeysuckle Rose, which he played with Duke Ellington when he was on tour in the States. Django and the Duke recorded this track in 1946, when Django came on tour to the United States. This track's part of an EP that they recorded at a concert in Chicago, with the three other tracks on the EP being Ride, Red Ride, a blues riff, and improvisation. Now, throughout Django's whole career, he had a reputation for being unreliable and turning up late for gigs. And this gig where they recorded the EP was no different, as he turned up to the venue late and without a guitar because he thought they'd already have one waiting for him. And in a late scramble to find him a guitar, they managed to find a hollow-body Gibson electric in the attic. Now, Django had never played on an electric guitar before, but he took to it quickly and was soon out on stage playing for the crowd. And his technique of picking incredibly hard with the right hand sometimes overdrove the pickups on the guitar, and you can hear it. He was still getting used to it as the gig went on. In this recording, he plays quite free at times, playing right across the bar line and squeezing odd numbers of notes into his fast phrases. Now this creates a really interesting sound when put alongside the perfectly regular, ticking along sounds of Ellington's rhythm section, who were really tight in this recording. And in typical Django fashion, he improvises around whilst playing the head. So this head that everybody knows still sounds really fresh when you listen to it even today. In this solo, he mixes in a few more bebop influence lines which weren't really present in his playing before the war, and this shows that he was still developing as a player even towards the end of his career. And like in many of his solos, he makes a lot of use of the chord tones, but he also uses a few blues licks in this solo. Another thing he does that takes influence from blues guitar is uses some note bends, and he generally does these around the blue notes and creates a lot of really nice dissonance. You can also hear on full show his very pronounced and bouncy swing feel, which these days some people might see as over-swinging the notes, but it's actually in the end become part of gypsy jazz's really iconic sound. This is Minor Swing, recorded by the Quintet de Hot Club in 1937. It was composed by Reinhardt and Grappelli together, and is arguably Django's most famous recording and has now become a standard that's been recorded over 100 times to date. Django himself recorded the tune 5 times in his career and recorded it for the final time in 1950. The tune has a 16-bar form for solos, which is based on a minor blues, and the head, which I guess could also be called the intro, also has a 16-bar form and outlines the chords A minor and D minor triadically in the melody. As a melody, it's very catchy and very simple to learn, so it's called a lot at jam sessions. The simplicity of the tune gives the soloists a lot of space to put their own stamp on the improvising and interpretation, and this has also helped it survive through the years. It's quite a quick tune, and they play it around 200 BPM on this recording, but Django's pronounced swing feel makes it seem a lot more relaxed and slow than it actually is. The gypsy jazz guitar complement they use, with its quite sustained strum on beats 1 and 3, and then the short percussive one on beat 2 and 4 adds to this swing effect. Again, Django heavily uses the chord tones in this solo, generally taking quite an arpeggio-based approach to his improvising. He also uses chromatic tremolo pick lines, however in this solo he interestingly does some of them descending rather than just ascending, which is more unusual in Django's playing. So, why are we still listening to Django Reinhardt? Now I think a big part of this is due to the way he had to create his own new style of guitar playing to get around his disability. Before being caught in that caravan fire in 1928, Django followed the rules of guitar playing that he had picked up from other Romani players and from records that he was hearing. But after the fire crippled his hand, he was forced to relearn everything completely differently. Now his unique handicap forced him to create a musical sound that was also completely unique. And to this day nobody has quite captured that, even while using 4 fingers. So some gypsy guitarists now will actually only use their first and second fingers to create a sound as close to Django as possible. Django also ushered in a new era for jazz, particularly European jazz, becoming the first European jazz musician to become a household name. His Quintet de Hot Club was the first all-string jazz band, which was really interesting, and his improvisational style was quite new and revolutionary as well, and this was due to the really unique combination of influences that he had. So you could almost think of gypsy jazz as a fusion genre because of this. Django was a rule breaker at heart, and this is what allowed him to play with the massively exciting freedom that still captures listeners even more than 80 years after his death. And from a compositional standpoint, Django's work tended to be based around a small number of very strong ideas that could have been made into whole compositions just in their own right. An example of this would be Minor Swing, where the melody is incredibly simple, yet the idea is so strong that it still works perfectly as a tune. This strength of ideas is a big reason of why his compositions are still played so much today.